So, welcome to all of you. And my name is Dr. Shubda Chaudhary. And recently, I have started my own volunteer-driven online platform called as Middle East Insights. And why I've chosen the term Middle East is also on the YouTube. There is an explanation for that. Um, the reason for starting it specifically was because there are two reasons. First is that I have lived across in different, like almost 7 countries. And what I realized that people, cultures, individualities, languages, ethnicities, religions, customs, all of them are very different everywhere. Second is when we come to India, the idea of, and I'm not saying only India in a simplistic form, but the idea of education over the period of time has become something which is very much linked to how much marks you get, what kind of job you get, what are your credits, what kind of appointments you get. And slowly, that takes away the entire charm of educating oneself or learning, unlearning, relearning. So I thought that why not, create the thought leaders for tomorrow, give a platform where the histories, sociologies, politics, analysis is not limited to the textbooks or syllabus that you're studying. If you're reading the same books as everyone else is reading, then you're having the same thoughts as everyone else is having. So, and this I realized through my own challenges because when I look back to what I was at the age of 19 or 20, I'm not going to tell you my age, but what I was, um, I never had a mentor specifically. Um, and it was a very lonely, tedious process to start in every country from the scratch. Thankfully, when I joined JNU, I had, one of the best mentors. But before that, when I was 19 to 22, 23 years old, I didn't have a mentor. When I look back to students of that age, or even, scholars of my age right now, I want them to be ahead of their time and space and eventually be ahead of even mine. What I learned at the age of, say, 30, you learn at the age of 18. That was the entire idea. We are not funded by anyone. There's no funding at all because that would create some kind of biased critique, right? So before we start, because most of you know me, many of you don't know me. So we will start with, I hope this is clear to everyone, the PPT. And the simple aspect is that what exactly is research? Why is research important? Why is it crucial? Why it matters? Where should you start? Why should you start? I mean, research scholars do not get very high income jobs or um, massive employment opportunities. Uh, so why should you invest your time, money, energy, labor in research? So actually, the entire process of education, is eventually whatever subject that you're studying. The process of education is about eventually knowing who you are. All roads will lead you to yourself, no matter what trajectory you choose. And research is a very fascinating process of developing critical thinking. That is very, very important. Critical thinking is very important. Why? I don't know if you guys know about Trevor Noah. Trevor Noah wrote this very famous book called as Born a Crime. And he was born in South Africa before, 1993, 94, before the apartheid, when the apartheid regime was in function. His mother was African, his father was Swiss. He was born in the colored race. Like that, in simplistic way, there are three kinds of races, in South Africa. One is the white, the other is the black. And those who are like me and you, they're called as colored people or colored race. So he was then born as a colored individual. He never met his father. A Swiss man having a relationship or even a child with an African woman was illegal. That is why Born a Crime. He became a very famous host in US in The Daily Show. One thing which really moved me in his book autobiography was the fact that he said that he owes his mother to develop how he thinks. Because mostly what happens is people tell you what to think, why to think in that way. But very, very less people, Trevor Noah. This is so. Just a second. Okay. So Trevor Noah, basically, he wrote this book, Born a Crime. And he was thankful to his mother because his mother taught him how to think, you know. She ensured that he knew so many languages within South Africa. And he knew English, all the tribal languages. And to think, because cognitively, every language that you know develops a different part of your brain and personality. And his mother never told him, that this is what you should think, this is your identity, this is where you're born, like geography is destiny. Never. But she taught him how to critique everything, be critical. So that is the beauty of research. And research is nothing more than, the answer is in the name itself. It's research. Means repetitive. Means repetitive. Search means to find out. But when you start to find out something, you don't already have, some kind of idea that this might be the truth. That is an assumption. This might not be the truth. Okay. But the idea is that how do you develop? There are so many different kinds of thinking hats, which I'll tell you about. And there's a book which is also on that you should not believe everything that you think. There's a book on that why you shouldn't believe in everything that you think. So research is very important in that regard. Now, coming to what we are going to discuss today, specifically about Middle East insights and a little bit about me. What is an abstract? What is Socratic method? What is epistemology? What is empirical research? What is, inductive, and I have spelling of deductive as spelled wrong, sorry. Deductive thinking. What is theory? Why is it important? Literature review is what? Normally we are said, literature review is this. But it's not so. And what are mind maps? That is also very important. So starting with who am I? My name is Dr. Shubda Chaudhary, and I was born in a very small town in Bihar. And though I look Bengali, I'm not. And I was born in a very lower income class family where education was a very big asset. And my parents had to sacrifice everything for my sister and I to get educated. And they did. With their support, I came then to Patna, which is the capital of Bihar, and studied over there. And I was a science student because I was the crucial, typical product of science is good and humanities and arts are, not. So I didn't even know what is political science or sociology or, how is history studied when I was growing up. Then I got into Delhi University. And when I got into Delhi University, I was very shy and introvert because I couldn't speak English properly. I would pronounce elite as elite. I would do the, grassroots level work of putting posters and going to colleges and advertising about events. But I would never had this um, penchant or the courage to even, speak because I was a migrant in Delhi. So there's a different socio-economic, political context to it. Slowly and slowly, I started reading, and then the US Embassy selected me by themselves, the US State Department, to go on a leadership summit in Washington, D.C. I was 18, 19 years old. And I didn't know. Initially, we thought it was a hack or some joke, like, when you have who wants to be a millionaire or billionaire, kaun banega crorepati. My parents were like, no, no, we didn't even know that what is a passport. We had no idea. So my father was like, no, no, it's a hack. Who does this? This is a hack. Because last 1 week before, I had gone to the embassy on a debate and I debated. I was the debater of the debating president in my college. When I went to US, the first thing which I realized was how much I don't know. And I'd never taken a flight before. And the first flight was international. And it was a very proud moment for me. I was like, oh my God, I've done something impossible. And everything that kind of, ignorance, arrogance that children have at that age. And I was very happy. When I went there, I was hosted by a Chinese mother and my roommate was Pakistani. So the whole, home was like a bit of South Asia. And when this started over the period of time, and my neighbors were African Americans. Once I asked my African American neighbor who on 4th of July that what does he do? And he was like 6 feet 5 inches, very tall. And he told me that he's a green manure transfer engineer. I didn't understand a word. I came back to my host mother and I told Ki, what is green manure transfer engineer? Now she looked at me, I was like 18, 19 years old. She didn't know how to explain. So she explained me in a simple way that he's in the sweeping, cleaning industry. And then I was like, wow, I mean, like in India, we have so much of casteism that the habitation of colonies or societies are decided on the basis of your either caste or income or religion. And here's this man staying in a similar, house, a Victorian kind of house, next to a Chinese lady. And that was phenomenal. And I believed in the power of labor, that how labor is respected in US. Over the period of time, the American dream and all of that has been contested. But that was what I'm saying from the point of an 18-year-old. Then I came back, realizing this is not a hack. It can happen in real life. No one was fooling me. So I decided I'll work very hard and I'll get a scholarship and I'll go to London this time. So I worked, I took my classes, I worked, did a freelance job, many freelance jobs. I never used to sleep because we were not able to afford a lot of money. And then I applied for only one university, which is University of Westminster in UK, because it had a scholarship program. And one of my seniors who really inspired me was a student over there. That's it. One university, one application. When my bachelor's was done from DU, my mother said, in fact, my best friend said that and I went on a road trip in a rural town in Maharashtra where there's no electricity, no proper water. Internet will be there if you climb the mountain and, go and the hiking, which I hate. I can't, my body's. So I lived there for 2 months, and I didn't tell my parents that I'm going in a village. I said, it's Mumbai. So my best friend used to say that everyone is coming on the road after bachelor's and you're going on a road trip. And I didn't apply for any other university in India. I was like, no, I'll go to Westminster. My parents were like at the verge of going to a bank, getting loan because they thought that daughter has gone crazy. We have to take a loan. We can't afford it. And as parents do when a child is, very stubborn. And I was like, come back. I'll get a scholarship. Just sit. And then my parents were like, she has completely lost it. Now she'll stay for 1 year at home. I got the scholarship on 15th of July. Fully funded. 15th of July, 2:30 p.m. I got the email. And I was the youngest Indian to get the scholarship. When I went to London, there was a certain kind of vacuum that came in my heart. Because, every time we are told that this is what you should achieve, this is what you should achieve, we are never happy with our success. We know what we are running for. But when I went to London and life was very comfortable, I'm also an artist. I had a beautiful room. The entire, one side was windows. I could see millions of colors at sunset and sunrise. And I was like, where do I go from here? I don't feel like wanting anything. It is comfortable. This is the dream that no one from Bihar, at this age has had. But then I was like, no, because that is the, cognitive dissonance that we all have. So then I thought, why not? Let's start working for some internship. So I was the first student in the batch to get an internship in an African French TV channel. And that is when in 2010, December, in my studio, while we covered the royal wedding and so many, human rights film festivals and everything, when the Arab uprising started taking place. And all my friends who were from Tunisia, Egypt, who had gone to US with me before, the Facebook was on fire. And I didn't understand what is happening. And my first boss was French. He told me that, go and interview people. So I used to go to the embassies by myself. Now imagine I was so scared of London, very scared of London, but I used to go take the tube and interview people, and I didn't know Arabic. So I was like, what is happening with me? I just don't understand what these people are saying. Why are they crying? Why are they protesting? And in UK, I realized that most of the newspapers had this kind of blatant, one-sided propaganda against the Arabs and the Arab street. It was blatant. There was no mention of how UK or US is funding the dictatorial regimes in the Arab world. At that age, I didn't understand also what is dictatorship and uh, what is happening, what is diaspora, what are asylum seekers, how an embassy functions. I didn't understand all of this, but I used to go and talk to people, and with the translator, I used to get it translated. Now, whenever you get a scholarship and whenever you get funded by a particular country, you have to sign a contract that you will go back to your country after uh, the time period is over. So I couldn't stay in London and I was scared of London. And I was like, okay, but I don't want to, I want to explore more. I want to do more. So I applied to 500, 1,000 places. And a think tank that works with the Foreign Ministry of South Africa hired me. I came back, stayed in India for 2 months and went to South Africa in Johannesburg by myself. There I realized the politics of race, the white supremacy, even the Indian, the Gujarati farmers, sugar plantation workers who had migrated to South Africa, and in Durban specifically, which is called as Mini India. I was staying in Johannesburg, the different socio-political context of Cape Town, and many other things I realized. I went to the museums, I saw the letters written by Gandhi and everyone. My friends used to say that you are a reincarnation of Gandhi. You're going, exactly the same trajectory. India, UK, South Africa, India. I'm like, hey. So the point is that when I was there, that is where I started working with the ambassadors and started interacting with people from the MENA region, that is Middle East and North Africa. I met a lot of Jordanians, a lot of Tunisians, a lot of diplomats. I understood a lot. I understood about Palestine, Israel over there. Before that, I didn't know what was the context. I didn't know who are Jews, who are Arabs, who are Armenians, nothing. And I was taught in a very difficult way, but I was taught about it. I had a boss who used to always, like my senior, not my main director, but my boss who used to always ridicule me that how did you get this training opportunity? You don't even know anything about the Arab world. And the fact was that it was true. I mean, what will I tell her? That she's true. I mean, like I was like, I was happy being in South Africa. No one has been in South Africa at my age from Bihar at this time, I think, my assumption. I'm very proud of myself. Why do I need to read more? Ignorance is bliss. So my senior used to always ridicule me. And to a point, it got too much. When it got too much, it had very racist and difficult contours of it. And that day I decided, it was my second or third month, and that day I decided that I'm going to prove her wrong, but I'll never tell her. For 6 months, I had a very strict routine. First, I went to her, I asked her for, like, in India, we have NCRT books and all of that. So I asked for the copies of those kinds of books from South Africa, studied them. She gave me the books. Then I started reading every book in the library that we had in think tank. And in 6 months, I finished 64 books. And I didn't prepare for JNU, but I got into JNU and my rank was second. The idea of coming back to India was specifically because I was also a bit tired. And second, I wanted to go higher than what in terms of education. A lot of people said, why don't you do UPSC? But I was like, if you do UPSC, then your education is limited to the goal that you're doing, right? This is your cause, this is your effect, this is what you want. Plan A, plan B, plan Z, God knows. But why should my learning be restricted to the syllabus? Why can't I learn everything and anything? Sadly, during COVID, the senior who used to ridicule me passed away in South Africa. And I was very, very sad that day because she was my nemesis and she taught me a lot. No one has taught so much. So the point is, when I came to India, I started reading. Professor Pasha was my mentor. And I was very happy. And I used to do a lot of things. And I went to Cambridge University to speak a couple of times. I went to Oman. I went for my field trip to Egypt for my PhD. In 2016, I went to West Bank in Palestine and got 11 Indians back safely, crossing 3 borders without the knowledge of Arabic or Hebrew. Went to Jordan just next. So over the period of time, I started thinking about how to make, a scholarship better. How can I improve the lives of people around me, students around me? How can I use all of this knowledge that I have? And you see so many books that I'm showing off. How can I use all of this for students who really need me? And there might be people who really need me, but I don't know about it. So I started working a lot. I wrote a lot of research papers. I work with many think tanks in Egypt and UAE right now. I also am the second peer reviewer for many journals. I was the MPhil examiner, external examiner in JNU also. For Rutledge, IB Taurus Sage, I have written papers specifically on Arab media and also about transgenders and the impact of COVID in India on them. And all of this taught me something which is very interesting, that I am nothing, if I'm not able to change even one single life around me. That's it. Without any agenda, without any kind of um, funding parameter or any kind of uh, hidden motive. Because the meaning of my name is Shubh Da. Shubh means someone who is auspicious. Da means giver or giving. So that is the very nature of who I am. Now, coming to mostly, like when we talk about research, a lot about me. Whenever we attend a class, on research, it is taught to you, कि, अच्छा, you should do simple things. Like, have an abstract, have an introduction, have a literature review, have a research methodology, hypothesis, data collection, conclusion. That is it. But it's not that simple. Just see, this is the abstract. This is the abstract that you write. Then comes the entire process of crafting the paper, which is the introduction. How do you introduce the topic? What change are you trying to make? Why are you doing it? Why do you think whatever you're assuming is true? Why do you think that is true? Then you have to play the devil's advocate and think that why, whatever you're thinking is not true. You can only be your worst critique. If you fall yourself following into any kind of ideology, then that is problematic. You shouldn't. So this is the introduction that you have to think about. I'll tell you how to think about things, topics. Then comes your data analysis. How you analyze the data, the sampling. How are you going to collect the, population or the subset of the population that you want to interview? How will you, talk to them? How will you get any kind of mode of understanding? Then comes eventually after 5, 6, 1 year, whatever, your paper. This is your paper. And suddenly you think that you're an expert in it because you have written a paper, right? And it has gone through peer review and everything. But let me tell you something. This is all that you will never know and you don't know. We can never really know. We can give a theory, we can give a principle, we can give a ideation, but truth is never singular. Truth is never absolute. Truth is never the whole picture in reality. The idea of looking at truth in that way is a very colonial idea. Truth is subjective. Truth is fluid. Truth is relative. It changes. So all of this is how you should see yourself as. This is the way of thinking. Now, coming back to Socrates, the entire Socratic mode of thinking. Socrates was, in Athens when he was born. He was in the military. He was also a stone cutter. He was married twice. His second wife used to, always fight with him because, what Socrates used to do. He'll just go out on the road and start randomly asking people questions. Why do you think? What are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why shouldn't you do something else? Why do you assume this? He'll never answer the question. Just for example, see here. Socrates is asking someone, what is courage? So someone replies that courage is standing up to your enemies, Socrates will tell you. So then it is courageous if you stand up to a stronger enemy and you know that you're going to be defeated. Is it courageous? So the person will say that, no, that would be foolish. So Socrates will say, so in your mind, courage is all about winning, right? You want to win. So the person will say that, no, it is about facing your fears and everything. So then Socrates will ask another question, that if it is courageous to face a fear, if you know it, will eventually go to harm you or others. Is it courageous? That is why we say we should pick our battles. Not every battle has to be fought. Not every context is a battle. So you see, the point of Socratic thinking is that he's never answering. He's not answering. He's asking questions. Questions from the answers, questions from the answer, questions from the answer. That is basically the concept that Socrates devised 2,500 years ago. And this was very interesting, the entire etymology. Etymology means what I told you about, like Shubh, Da. Meaning is what? The root. Shubh means what in Sanskrit? Da means what in Sanskrit? Etymology is the origin of words, of the context. So Socratic mode of thinking is very important whenever you're thinking. There are very many modes of thinking. But Socratic mode of thinking is very important because then you are able to, and you can never think alone. Let me tell you, there's also a book on that. We cannot think alone. If you think that you will just, read a lot of papers, you will do a lot of research, you will watch a lot of news, you will be able to think differently. No, you learn a lot only and only through conversations. You learn it more. That is why Middle East Insights, sorry. The idea was, that we will have speakers from the indigenous part or that region to come and speak with us. Doesn't matter if that person, whatever the history of that person is, but we are going to have a conversation. We're not going to judge. We're not going to have our own assumptions. We don't know the language. We have never been there in many of the countries. We are never going to form an assumption before. Because how does it feel, when you put down a total, complete stranger whom you have never met and you'll never meet in your life out of your own thinking? This is a quote from How to Kill a Mockingbird. So that was the entire idea. Now, coming next is, what is an abstract? So you look here at this picture. So when the Renaissance started, right, which was in 1300, 1400s, Florence was basically one of the cities in Italy that it started from. You had Leonardo da Vinci and then his student, Michelangelo. All of them were happily, yes. Not Michelangelo, but so Michelangelo was basically a very interesting kind of student. Leonardo was very famous for painting murals, for sculptures, for portraits, because that is the time you didn't have electricity and everything. Leonardo was very much more focused on sculptures. But Michelangelo was much more focused on sculptures. Leonardo was more towards paintings and murals and everything. And a lot of Christian kings used to give contracts to them to paint in the churches. Michelangelo always used to abuse Leonardo. Always. And, like challenge him for painting a mural or challenge him in front of him. And Leonardo was like, why is this guy, so young and a budding sculpture artist always challenging me? And eventually he came to know in a very difficult conversation that all his life Starting from his childhood, Michelangelo worshipped Leonardo. There was a time when he wanted to meet him. He was not able to, so he had that anger. But if there was one mentor that Michelangelo had, was Leonardo, actually. Leonardo didn't even know. Leonardo was one man who'll go to the morgue and cut human bodies and figure out, how, where is the heart, where's the lung, where's the kidney, and, make drawings accordingly. He was the first person to even imagine having a plane. So he was ahead of his time. Now, why the concept of abstract came? So when Enlightenment later in 1700s, 1800s started, so the idea of God was being questioned. That is God a reality? God exists, or God is not there? How do you know if there is God? We have so many religions, but how do you know if there is God? Have you seen God? When I was in London, I went to a black um, prayer meeting. I used to go every Tuesday for reading the Bible because I believe in going to all the places of worship, specifically in Jordan and Palestine. I've even been to the mosques where women are allowed, by the way. So I go to every place of worship. When I went to the Bible reading class, everyone was crying. And these were families in diaspora from Mali, Chad, Sudan. South Sudan was not born yet, from Nigeria. And they were crying. And when they were reading the Bible, and they were saying that they have seen God. And I was like, I'm the only person here who has not seen God. I've never seen God. But the faith was so strong. And I was often jealous of it. When I went to Hebron, Hebron is a small place, a very fragile, place in West Bank. Um, it has a mosque and a synagogue side by side because they're the graves of Abraham and Sarah, who are basically the starting couple of all the religions, be it Judaism, Christianity, Islam. So half part of it is mosque, half part of it is synagogue. And when I went there, I felt a certain kind of difference. I felt something. I felt that in Pushkar. I felt that in very few places. But the idea is that why am I talking about God? Because God is something that you feel or have faith in. You can't see God. Again, then it will be about what is seeing or ways of seeing. Again, there's a book on that. Ways of seeing. So what was happening in 17, 1800s was that people had lost faith in God. Friedrich Nietzsche was saying that God is dead. When Friedrich Nietzsche will die, God will say Nietzsche is dead. But anyway, so the concept of abstract painting or modern art emerged because everything before that was portraits with clear boundaries and everything. Why did it start? Abstract painting? It started because when you yourself do not have a defining figure or idea in your life, shaping your contours or forms or giving a border to your life, there's no God. Why should painting, art, architecture have it? Shouldn't be much more open ended. Let the abstract painting have that impact. Simultaneously, the concept of abstract in a research paper was started in 1660 by Royal Society of London, which is one of the oldest scientific institutions in the world. And by 1665, they made it mandatory that every paper that has to be submitted needs to have an abstract and keywords, because a lot of papers were being published. What is a summary? What is the nature of your work? All of that has to be submitted before. So in this slide, I've told you two different meanings of abstract. Next, we come to what are the different types of thinking. One is inductive and the other is deductive, though they overlap. Inductive reasoning is what? Whatever swan that I have seen is white. Whatever cat that I have seen is white. So all cats are white. Which means that whatever you have seen in your life as you believe to be true and generalized to everyone. Whatever is personal, it is generalized. It is my personal experience, so it must be happening with everyone else. That is inductive reasoning. You have specific observations. And then you come to general conclusion that this must be the truth. This must be what the theory is. So for a very long time, the scientists believe that all the swans are white in color or pink in color or gray in color. So they concluded that all swans are white, all elephants are gray, all camels are brown. I've never seen a pink camel. All crows are black. I've never seen a white crow. Right? That is inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is the opposite of it. So what happened was there was a black swan which was found in Australia. And in Australia, you can find anything. And now the scientists were like, what? This is wrong. We have to change our own theory. This is completely, it doesn't make sense. So whenever you have a moment in history which you cannot predict, that is called as a black swan moment or a black swan. Like right now, we don't know Iran will retaliate or how it will retaliate or Hezbollah will retaliate. Black swan. No one can predict it. So deductive reasoning is that you go from general premises. You see what is generally happening everywhere. And then you come to your conclusion. Deductive is much more comprehensive. For example, all humans are mortal. Every human will die. Anyone who is born will die. Socrates was a human. So Socrates is mortal. Simple. All and then specific. That is deductive reasoning. Then comes the scientific method. Scientific method is basically a mixture of both inductive and deductive. How? When as a researcher, you are, say for example, there was a story, there was a white American scientist, I guess, in 1950 or 60s. He went to one of the villages, tribal villages in one of the countries of Africa. And this is how it went. The tribals, African tribals were like, who is he? Why has he come? Have we invited him? Why is he trying to talk to us? Who is he? And the scientists were like, who are they? They are so scary. How will I talk to them? I don't know their language. This is the kind of, distancing which is always there, a problem which is always there between a subject and an object. But the scientist was like, again, thinking about in terms of science, that these people are so tribal and primitive. They believe in, tribal worshipping, prophecies. They don't even have a doctor. They drink lake water. They eat raw meat. Or they cook it, I don't know how, without a microwave. And they have colored themselves in various colors. How primitive and how unhygienic. Oh my God. How will I talk to them? And the tribals were like, this guy is so white, we don't even need to do an X-ray of him. All his veins are like thumping, thumping, thumping. How can someone be so white? There's something wrong with his body. This guy believes in someone called as a doctor who gives him medicine. And then the disease will come again. Then what is a medicine? He doesn't talk to us, but he talks on the phone. How can you talk to someone through a machine? Talking is always face to face. It has more value. He drinks bottled water. Very upset tummy he has. He does not worship nature. Does he know that he's a small part of this nature? What is happening? Both the sides are critiquing each other. So, say for example, now you go to that particular context. As a researcher, it is your role to observe what is happening around in that village, identify the patterns, and develop a hypothesis. Like my students know this hypothesis that if I don't send Zoom link 2 hours before, which means I will give some excuse to cancel the class. This is a tested hypothesis. It can be because I go to other places, there are so many things I'm overworked with. So this happens with me. And I'm like, so the point is that you observe the phenomena, identify the patterns, and develop the hypothesis. That is inductive. But when you start experimenting and collecting data, there's one thing to observe the tribals. There's another thing to understand or collect data on why they believe in tribal nature worship and what kind of nature worship, and collect data. That is deductive. Then you start experimenting. Do they believe in this god, that god? No, no, this tree, no, that tree, that leaf, no, no, that do, that lake, no, that lake. What? That is deductive logic. But for deduction, you have to experiment. Then when you analyze and conclude, then it is both inductive and deductive in a general way. Because your hypothesis is deductive. You have read so much of literature review, right? You're trying to deduce something. And then you're giving some kind of follow-up that, other people, other scholars who read your work, what kind of thought they should develop. Because you have the idea that someone will read my paper, no? It will not be stored as a PDF in a laptop. Then that is inductive reasoning because you have read so many people's paper. I'm sorry for using the term people, but I'm just trying to generalize it. So what I'm trying to say is that these are some aspects. Now, what is abductive reasoning? It's not about abduction, that go and kidnap someone. No, it's about bridging the gap. Recently, I reviewed a paper about, I wanted to show the paper, but then I did not because it is against the ethics of copyright. Even if I'm the reviewer, it will be unethical for me to show that paper. But the paper was on women in Yemen specifically, right? And the scholar had done a very, very interesting job in trying to understand. Women in Yemen after the Arab uprising, basically. That was the context. So I was like, my first question was, what is the time frame? 2013 to 2014, 2013 to 2024. What is the time frame of study? Second, women is not a homogeneous entity, no? Women in rural parts of Yemen and urban parts of Yemen will be different. Women from different, because it's a very tribal sectorial, division. So they have thousands of tribes. Every tribe's women will be different. Women will be different on the basis of age, on their married and unmarried status. And so many things will make women different. So women as specific as a term itself, the problem started there for me. Then Yemen. Now imagine someone, if anyone does an entire paper on India, I'm like, India is so big, no? Even if you are 1.6 billion people, even if your sample has 1 lakh people, it is not India, no? From 1st of January 2020, and this is my favorite dialogue, 60,000 children have been born in India every day. In 2021, it was 59,595. babies per day. So this is, come on. So how can you just have an entire idea of a country? You cannot talk about the entire of Yemen. There are Houthi rebels. There are, port cities of Aden and others. There are so many different, the coffee that you drink, the mocha coffee. Mocha is a region in Yemen. And then women who are activists, women who have fought for the independence of Yemen, women who have written about their culture, women who speak Arabic, other languages, women who are from the Shia sect, Sunni sect, so many other things. So the whole of Yemen also is a problem. I can't say whole of Egypt, no? So abductive reasoning is basically to understand what is the gap. Yesterday, I saw a meme on Twitter. There are two cars, and in the distance, there's a cat which is sitting down. And the author is saying that this is the research gap that should be filled. And my comment was, there should be a cattery. Cattery is a place where you have many cats. So abductive reasoning is basically, you know this, but you don't know what is in between. You're trying to link something. The gap, you think that this kind of information does not exist. I have to find out. There's one scholar, student I'm teaching, who's trying to work about, oh, I can't share that idea. It's very interesting. Sorry. So, for example, there is, you're trying to bridge the gap that, say, for example, anxiety in students, adolescents in India, case study of Delhi or, Mumbai or whatever has been done. Impact of that has been done. But I want to do specifically about students of the age 18 to 21 after graduation from the COVID batch. Very specific. After COVID batch. I want to understand their anxiety levels. So I can build a lot on the literature of various other, kinds of nomenclatures that had existed before to understand ki pehle to what is anxiety? What are different terms of adolescent anxiety? Now, a lot of, students do this mistake. They're quoting about anxiety and they'll quote some American psychologists, psychiatrist, academic. And my question is like, why not indigenous? Indians, psychologists or psychotherapists or academics have not written about it. Yeah? Have they not? So if we have students from Pakistan, Indonesia, Bangladesh, they also should first find out Bangladeshi or Pakistani or Indonesian scholars and then go towards the West or East or whatever. First, what is your own cultural reality? And then try to bridge the gap that exists. Like Sherlock Holmes, when he'll go to some place, he'll try to go to a crime scene and try to find out what are the cues that he is seeing around him. That is inductive. He will develop a possible explanation that this might have happened, this might have happened, this might have happened. That is abductive. And then he can test it, whether it's true or not, and find the criminal. And that is deductive. Next is about iterative process. Research is often cyclical. Once a scholar asked me that, can I add also this in my paper and this also in my paper and this also in my paper? Yes, Aksa. So I said that no, it's cyclic. Yeah, the meaning is that you do one study, then after some time you do another study building on that study. Then after some time again do some study building on that study. Not everything in one study. Because research is looking under a microscope. You should be that specific when it comes to research. Then comes metacognition. Now, what is metacognition? Metacognition is thinking about your own mind and how you think. Can you see yourself in third person? Like I can see myself that, I'm going blah, 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 out of the body experience. So how that is self-critique, or just thinking about how you think and how you develop patterns and loops of thought. And what are your problems of thinking? All of that is important when it comes to research. Now, there's two or three interesting stories I'll tell you. This first interesting story of philosopher and the pigeon. Ludwig Wittgenstein, he was a very famous philosopher, and he was taking a class on the nature of language one day. And he's talking about very, very difficult, complex linguistic theories. And, he's talking about symbols and their meaning and context. And suddenly there's a pigeon that comes in his class. And all the students are like, laughing. Hey, hey, hey. And the pigeon is also not less of a showstopper. The pigeon is also roaming around and flying in the class. That look at me, making noises. Then suddenly Ludwig stopped. He stopped and he said that the pigeon is not using birds. The pigeon is using noises, what we call as noises. But the pigeon is communicating. That is also communication. And that was another kind of theoretical model of development that his linguistic theory had. And this case study is called as Philosopher and the Pigeon case study. The next case study is the parable of the blind men and the elephant. This you'll see in a lot of contexts. So what happened was that 6 blind men were asked to come into a room, and there was a big room, obviously not this room, a big room hall or outside, and come and touch an elephant. All of them are blind, and they're doing it for the first time. Every man is touching some part of the elephant. Someone is touching the trunk, someone is touching the ear, someone is touching the nose, someone is touching the leg. And all of them have limited experience. Based on their limited experience, all of them think what the elephant is. Someone thinks that the trunk is a snake. Someone thinks the ear is a fan. Someone thinks that, the leg is like a sofa. And they think that this is what the elephant is. Is it what the elephant is? So as a researcher, you always have to, that's why I said that, this eventual context. You'll never know. We all are, always in every context, we are always one of those blind men touching the elephant. Always. Next comes a very strong philosophical question that you have to ask yourself before you think about anything, which is, if a tree falls in a forest and there was no one to hear it fall or see it fall, did the tree really fall? So these are very interesting idea, like talking about epistemology. Like, first, let me question about what is empirical. This is something which I do with my students. And I give you the option of unmuting yourself. Please tell me, how many pens do I have? How many pens do I have?
You have
Five.
two.
5 pens.
1 pen.
1
Two
pen.
pens.
2 pens.
2 pens, a marker, and a pencil.
Okay.
You have one single pen.
Okay. Now, what we did right now, that is empirical experimentation. How? You employed your logic. You looked at the context, you answered. My question was, how many pens do you have? Someone said 5. Aribhai, this is pencil, so this is out. Pen. Now, all of them are pens, no? This is a pen that writes on paper. This is a pen that writes on the whiteboard. This is a pen that writes on CD cover and plastics. This is a pen that writes on the pen tab. All of them are pens. I didn't mention that which pen writes on paper, no? I didn't ask that question. This is empirical research. Mostly people confuse it with quantitative research. No, empirical research is not quantitative research. It is about logical deduction, which can be quantitative, no problem. You're giving a quantitative answer, na? 5, 5, 4, 3, 1. Right? At the beginning of the paper, how many standard references should be added to the introduction of a good research paper? There's no number as such. But if you're introducing a term, ha, here, the last. If you're introducing a term in your paper, you should ensure that you have, in the introduction itself, the term is, the evolution of the term is explained. So, for example, if you're talking something on gender, right? So, gender has no one definition, no? So, you have to first see that there are different kinds of theories on how you look at gender. Find thinkers and then create an analysis and show the evolution of the term gender. So there's no calculation as such that introduction should have 10 references or 15 in-text citations, not necessarily. But it depends on your paper. Now, if you're doing something on very contested conflict zone, you know. So first you have to explain what is a conflict. And then you will see that someone in, like, I'm just generalizing and in a simplistic way, but someone in the West will have a different idea of conflict. Someone in the East will have a different kind of, idea of conflict. You have to get all those ideas together because a term also has a life. The terminology will continue, even if you and I will not continue. So how has that term evolved? Every time, like I train my students when I train about them writing an introduction, whatever term that they use in the paper, I want the exact evolution of that term. And I want facts and sources to support their assumption of the evolution of the term. Right? There's so many. There's a Marxist understanding, there's critical theorist understanding, there's realist understanding, there is a liberal, neoliberal understanding, constructivist understanding, literary theory understanding. So many understandings of terminologies. You have to look at it from every perspective of every term. Now, coming back, we come to epistemology. So, epistemology is, what is this? It is a study of knowledge. It talks about questions like, how do we know what do we know? How do I know that students are watching this class? I can't see anyone. How do you know that it is me only? And it is not my ghost or some doppelganger? How do you know that you are not dreaming? It is Sunday evening, you should have a life. Right? So what is the nature of knowledge? How can you justify your belief? That is epistemology. So for example, your very famous René Descartes. I'll tell you what happened. René Descartes, we all know that he gave this quote, I think, therefore I am. But in 1600s, I guess, he was having a very difficult time to believe that who he is. Very difficult time. Who he is, he doesn't know. And wars are going on and everything. He's also employed in the military and everything. And Descartes is a philosopher. And as philosophers, he's all. So he's like, who am I? Who am I? What is the meaning of my life? Am I really like alive or am I dreaming? Is this like movie like the Inception? Dream within a dream within a dream. How do I know this is reality? Oh, I pinch myself, it pains. So am I alive? Who am I? So what he literally did was he locked himself in a room with a heated oven, ready to burn down. Just to test. And in that moment, he started thinking, what like, am I dying? What is happening? Is it? And that is the context when he came back with, I think, therefore I am. Because my mind is thinking, therefore I must be existing somewhere in this philosophical universe. I'm able to think. Therefore I exist. That was a very risky way. Don't do it at home. But that is ontology. Ontology is a study of your existence. Just think of, like, I have been having ontological thoughts, and it happens often, when you face death and genocide and many things. There are so many people who are born every day all over the world, right? In a simplistic way, I can say that they have similar functions. They are born, they grow up, they study, they get educated or whatever, they work, they marry, they have kids, they grow old, they die. Like in a very simplistic way, if I want to say. So all the, 6, 7 billion people in this world, at least majority have a similar trajectory, right? So what makes your life so different or my life so different? Why are you alive then? Why am I alive then? What is the meaning of my life? What am I going to do so differently? If God had a purpose for me, then what is it? Or God had a purpose for you, then what is it? If God existed.